that editing videos is fucking gay, and I hate it. I'll let you guys know I'm not editing videos for all you fuckers for every goddamn video. It's a pain in the dick. It's a waste of my time. How y'all doing?
And we're demonetized.
Well, I wasn't fucking monetized anyway. I'll probably never get there anyhow, so what's it matter?
I just got the
Not
YouTube notification.
Oh shit! The one time. Oh yeah,
same.
after I slam all the f bombs in it. Of course,
I
that's the.
usually get it.
Oh, Hutch is on his smoke break. Hey Hutch.
Yeah,
I'll
we
wait
were
till.
just talking about those Nezumi chest rigs. I bought 2 for my boys for Christmas, and when I got them, I opened them up just to like look them over real quick. So I haven't messed with it at all. My initial impressions are not great.
Oh boy.
That's kind of
Like
how I felt.
it's super thin, and I don't think I don't like the whatever liner that they used. Like it just seems like it's gonna not be durable. I don't know. It could be.
That's depressing. I have yet to get my hands on mine because mine's still at some random dude's house that I don't even know the address to. So, yeah, that's a lot of fun for Muffin.
Well, after Christmas, I'll borrow it from them, and then I'll start messing with it, put it through its paces a little bit.
Yeah. I was hoping they'd be, well, obviously I don't have my hands on it yet, but the game plan was it was going to be a cheap stack for everybody all the way around. So you could, um, you know, deck out like 10, 20 dudes in your mag, everybody pitch in, and you have a universal kit for everybody.
I'm not saying it won't work. Just
Yeah.
I don't think it's ready for World War III
Yeah.
and the
I don't know.
trenches.
I'm pretty, and I've talked about it before, but I'm pretty happy with just a taps rig, honestly. They're comfortable. They hold up really good. It does everything I want it to. It doesn't have any extra crap I don't need, and it fits really close to my body, which was the issue I had with the Condor rig. But of course, I walked with that Condor rig for like 4 or 5 years anyway. So if we're going to talk about miles that my fat ass has put on something, I put more miles in Condor gear than anything. So, and it still works and it's still not shredded and everything like that. Have I been running and gunning up under freaking barbed wire fences and over trenches and underwater? No. Am I going to be doing that in real life world scenarios? No. So it's probably going to be fine. So, you know, Muffin Top's not special forces material anymore. I don't even know if I ever was in my peak, but
Special resources.
yeah, that's for sure. Send me to the front of the line for lunchtime, baby. That's what I'm talking about. But we got a live chat here. I forgot to click live chat. Hey, everybody. Fiend Dog was first one in here. I don't have the muffin game going. I'm so sorry, guys. We're gonna do a book chat tonight. Hey, what up, DJ? You wanna link, my dude? Sorry, I couldn't hop in with yours. I was still doing dad shit. Um, uh, how many muffin panes for the whole unit? What? I
Said
like
he
how
likes how you
muffin
feel.
plans for the whole unit. Oh, good. I'm just dyslexic and retarded. That's good.
Like you're concerned about your whole mag.
Yeah. Exactly. Like I say, my number's 4. If you can have 4 kits, and everybody in your mag is that way, every one family. So say you have 4 to 10 families. I'm not going to go past any more numbers than that. If you have 10 families in your mag, and each family has 4 kits, that's 40 exact loadouts. That's the name of the game. If you have anybody else trusted, if you have anybody else trained up, if you have anybody else who could rotate in, like your wife or your brother or your grandpa or your dad whilst you're sleeping, and all the gear is set up the same way, and everybody's muscle memory and everybody's training is set up the same way, standardization is how you win. It cuts down training and cross training time by a lot. That's why I preach standardization of unit equipment, just like the military, just like police. Now, I notice a lot of police officers and stuff like that have really started customizing their gear to be like their own. And quite frankly, I think like 80s cops had it right, like identical gear. Everybody knows exactly where everything is at. You know, it's way easier to grab whatever. Like, it's just basic. Army guys. 10 army guys, all your shit's pretty much laid out the same fucking spot. Right? Some dude's dragging you through the mud, he could probably figure out where your sidearm is if he needs to fucking, you know, if you or grab your IFAK or grab your dingleberries, whatever needs grabbed, it's probably in the same spot as on his body. He can envision where your tourniquet's at. He can grab your fucking tourniquet for you. Same with if you're being dragged, you can be like, oh man, I need to hook up my buddy with some suppressive fire, and you pull his sidearm, whatever. You know where his mags are, or you have your sidearm in your hand, but you need more mags. You can feel where his mags are, load them in, keep fucking pressing that trigger. You know what I'm saying? Or you can gooch check him, whatever. I don't care what you guys do, but you know, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's get this audiobook going because I've heard a lot of people talking about it this week. Big channels. I think Red Dawn dropped it. I think it was who was that? Tim Kennedy, the guy who was just in jail for domestic assault or whatever. Is that the guy?
No,
Wrong guy.
no, 2 different people.
Mike Glover.
That's my
Thank
number.
you. Yeah. Was that the guy who was in Red Dawn's video? Yeah. We've been talking about this on the Muffin Top channel all year due to a good friend of mine who has let me know and said, yes, this is a high probability event. And this is what I've been prepping for. This is what my EDC, my get home bag and everything has been geared towards this year. This is the hardest I've geared my prepping into this. And this is the Day of Wrath. This is written by the same guy who wrote 1 Second After. We're listening to this book because it's long overdue, in my opinion. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm getting my stuff over in my hashtag yellow lid tote video ready and editing videos, and I realize I absolutely fucking hate editing videos. So you guys are all welcome. All fucking welcome for this. I'm not doing this much editing ever again. But yeah, it's a pain in the dick. Let's do this. Let's do this book. We're gonna every chapter we're gonna stop and talk about what we listened to. Anybody else who hops in the panel in between here and there, cool. You guys can play the Muffins game to your heart content. If I get bored, I'm gonna start doing curls because, quite frankly, I'm so sick of editing videos. I would rather just work out. So, you guys have fun with this. I'm not gonna be watching the comments. If you guys see something baller, feel free to address. Sound gooch? Yeah. We are simul streaming to Rumble, so we have 1 on Rumble and 5 on YouTube. We have 6 people watching. Why the fuck am I even talking? Okay, let's do this. Anything else you guys have to say before I do
Let's roll.
Let's do it. Let's fucking do it.
Smoke 'em if you got 'em.
Boom. Don't be copying word tight.
Jane, we have lived with the abnormal for so long. We believe it to be normal. Bob Peterson gazed at the screen for a moment, not sure if he should continue. He had long ago come to the conclusion that blogging and posting commentary on Facebook was
Not
a
good.
supreme act of self-indulgence. A few friends might read it, act polite,
That's better.
and give a thumbs up.
Yeah.
There had been a time, before he made the wiser career choice of going into IT education versus creative writing, that he fancied he might make it as an author. After all, he lived in Maine, home to a lot of writers, and had even attended a few writers' workshops. The workshops were finally enough to convince him to pursue a more stable line of work, especially after he met Kathy, married, and started to think about a family. Facebook, for him, was not a place to vent. But today, this morning, the news of the day, echoing from the kitchen where Kathy was preparing lunches for their daughter Wendy and him to take to school, was yet another overwhelming litany of bad news, and it triggered a sense of foreboding. The offensive by ISIS in Iraq was on the march again. More images of mass executions, beheadings, and Christians being crucified. These were the horrors committed under the guidance of the one who had declared himself to be the returner of the caliphate, a man who, to Bob, was every bit as threatening as a Hitler or bin Laden. Bob's younger brother had died over there back in 2004. For what, in light of this latest news? Reports echoed from the television in the kitchen about the border along Texas. Not all trying to cross were refugees from impoverished Central America. New indications were that it was a route Middle Eastern terrorists were using to infiltrate. But for what? A commentator on his preferred news network just last night stated that he felt the perfect storm was about to explode. It had been a somewhat sleepless night. Kathy always told him he worried too much about what he could not fix, but this morning he was up an hour earlier than usual to just jot down some thoughts. It was as if some inner voice whispered that he had to make a statement now, to do it this morning before he left for work. Later in the day he would look back at it, and hopefully today would be an ordinary day like all the others across the years, and he'd be slightly embarrassed that he had posted these ramblings. We expect to be lied to, he continued to write. In fact, the truth is so rare these days that we think it is spoken only as a maneuver of the moment to cover yet another lie. Our leaders tell us to believe in them, that they do all for our good. They tell us that they fight for our rights while they travel about in entourages costing millions for their monthly vacations. They tell us to conserve, for all is running short, while their private jets take them to their next gathering. What are proclaimed to be our entertainers are experts on all things simply because they act a role in a movie. Their role model to our youth is one of dissipation, mocking any of us who try to teach our children any type of values. News last night was of yet another $30,000 a plate fundraiser to pay for yet more lies to blanket their hypocrisy, to opiate us while the worshipful media stands awestruck. Every night is Oscar night in Washington with some self-congratulatory award. Every day a new scandal of the day, at least for that 24-hour news cycle, is examined with about as much critical skill as that of entertainment reporters gasping about who left her husband for a new affair. Politics are merged with entertainment, and entertainment with politics, though one used to be only for diversion while the other truly was, and still is, a matter of life and death. The death of a second-rate actor to drugs draws more media and mourning than the sealed metal boxes returning from the Middle East. He paused after writing that line. The morning that he and Kathy were preparing to head to Dover Air Force Base to greet the returning casket of his brother, the headline news was about the accidental death of yet another entertainer to a drug overdose. Several days later, the media lavished attention on tearful fans weeping at the funeral. His brother and 4 others of his squad were buried that day, and it hardly made local news. The only ones who wept at his brother's funeral were his family, friends from high school, and a comrade who had been assigned to escort the body, or what was left of the body, they never opened the casket, home from Iraq. He sat in silent reflection for a moment, then continued to write. The new daily scandal of Washington has become business as usual, to be forgotten a day later with a new scandal, a new affair. The reality show has become reality, and the real world an increasingly anesthetized dream to be ignored. And those of us who dare to question do so with voices lowered, for in America today, the worst sin of all, the real sin, is no longer racism or hatred. It is simply fear that you might offend. The Republic was not founded by those who feared to offend. It was not created by those who were afraid to fight back. Is it time to fight back? But how do we fight back? What do we fight back against? How do we fight back? Hey, Bob, you're going to be late. He looked at the screen, scrolled back over what he just wrote, highlighting it, and poised his finger over the delete button. Why bother? I'm just pissed off this morning. Vent here, and I get 80 comments back, most of them inane, asking what the hell is bugging me. It will disappear while everyone prefers to see the latest video clip of who twerked her ass last night at some awards ceremony or had a dress malfunction, and after all, we are being told that all the scandals are phony anyhow. Come on! He stood up, looked again at the screen, and let his finger drift from delete to enter. He hit the enter button, posting his musings, and felt a twinge of regret and embarrassment. Which friends would be offended today? Kathy was waiting out in the kitchen, making the loving gesture of holding out a cup of coffee. She was wearing what he called her frumpy bathrobe, her hair still something of a tangle and no makeup, all factors which made her even more lovable to him. Given their surprise a year ago, she had resumed the role of staying at home for a few more years. He gladly took the cup and drained it halfway in 2 gulps. She had mixed it nearly half and half, coffee and cream, even though she was on his case about the cholesterol in the cream. She had taken on the ritual of getting up an hour earlier than he to cook breakfast for their older daughter and make his coffee. He simply couldn't stand food other than some caffeine to provide the jolt for waking up to face the outside world. After, of course, he engaged for a few minutes in his fantasy of being a writer. They had met in their junior year at the University of Maine in Bangor, had scandalized their very Catholic parents by living together their senior year, and then stilled that scandalizing by marrying a week after graduation. Kathy had been a secondary math education major, he a computer education major. He had taken his father's advice to get a degree that will get you a job, and chased the dream of writing afterwards. They had actually scored positions at the same school in a suburb of Portland, teaching side by side for 4 years until Wendy came along. Kathy had taken a couple of years off for their first daughter, then gone back to teaching, until their midlife surprise of 2 years back. Every morning now he could see her duality. She adored being a full-time mother again, but as she handed him his cup of coffee to pack him off for another day at school, he could sense her longing, her missing of their kids at Joshua Chamberlain Middle School. The day was one of those glorious Maine autumn days. A touch of frost was on the car out in the driveway, and he remembered fondly their first year of teaching. Leaving the apartment, he would go out first, when it was down near 0 degrees, to scrape the car and heat it up before she dashed to its warmth. Their daughter Wendy stood behind her mother. She bore such a striking resemblance to the family album photos of her mother at the same age. Lanky, long-legged, and coltish, her red hair was tied back in a ponytail. Already the clear signs were there of the stunning beauty she would grow into, but she was still very much Daddy's girl, even though she tried not to let that show, especially around her friends. And she was obviously ticked off that Dad was running late. Her morning gossip circle awaited in homeroom. She could barely spare a quick glance to her dad as he pecked her on the cheek. Then she was back to her cell phone, texting away and chortling about how someone named Janie was definitely going to get it good today for being caught kissing the boyfriend of some girl named Hallie. He glanced at Kathy and said nothing. Wasn't that supposed to start when they were 15 or so? Even though he taught middle school, he still looked at his charges as children, though popular culture had been putting girls, such as Miley Cyrus, at age 15 on the cover of Vanity Fair for years. Kathy made no comment about the scandal at school as she tucked a packed lunch into Wendy's backpack, leaned up, and kissed Bob on the cheek. Have a good day. He kissed her back and looked over her shoulder to Shelley, their 1-year-old, sitting in a high chair at the kitchen table. She was happily smearing her face and hair with chocolate pudding, laughing away at whatever was the inner delight of 1-year-olds when putting on disgusting displays. Wendy spared a quick glance at her kid sister and gave a grunt of disgust. You were just as gross at that age, Bob offered. She simply rolled her eyes. I was perfect compared to that, Wendy bragged, but he could see a bit of an affectionate smile regarding the brat's display. Want to trade jobs for the day? Kathy sighed, eyeing Shelley, then back at the two of them heading off to school. You were the one who said it'd be fun to have another, he replied, a bit defensively. Yeah, was all he could muster out of her. Just one day, come on. You guys can stay here, clean up the smeared chocolate, change the diapers, watch that damn purple dinosaur dancing around on television, and I can at least have a 5-minute intellectual conversation with some 12-year-olds. She looked at the two wistfully, eyebrows raised, head tilted to one side, and with a trace of an impish smile. The look that could always nail Bob and leave him a bit weak in the knees, even after all these years. He realized she was actually half serious, and that if he said yes, she'd dash off to the bedroom, slap some makeup on, and be out the door with Wendy, telling their principal that she was his sub for the day. Wendy looked at her mother with sympathy, but her glance indicated that she also thought her mother's appeal must be insane. Intellectual conversation? 7th grade? Come on, Mom, you gotta be kidding. Next year, was all Bob could offer, not sure if she was really lamenting or just trying to make them feel guilty as they headed out for another day in the world. Kathy smiled, that same winsome smile that had caught him on the day they met, when he could have sworn that her eyes actually sparkled with light the first time he gazed into them. She brushed back an errant wisp of red hair from her face, leaving a smear of chocolate pudding on her jawline and neck, which made him laugh softly and half kiss, half lick it off her. "Don't do that," she whispered so that Wendy, standing expectantly by the door, would not hear. "You'll get me thinking, and I'm stuck here alone without you." "Maybe tonight," he whispered. "Come on, Dad, we're late." The two peeked over at their 12-year-old standing at the doorway, who gazed at them with a look of exasperation and judgmental embarrassment at parents who act too affectionately. Kathy pushed him away. "Get going." He paused, drawn to the television screen on the kitchen counter. Today's lead stories we're covering after the break. The shooting incident yesterday at Robert Morrison High School outside Syracuse, New York, that left 4 people dead and 10 wounded is drawing increasing scrutiny, with the report released at 7 this morning by an anonymous official that the gunman had a letter on his body in Arabic that proclaimed that the time of the jihad promised by ISIS had come. Federal officials on the scene are dismissing the report and urging calm. All schools in the Syracuse area are closed for the day. Across the bottom of the screen, the ticker tape was providing a brief account of the deaths of 3 border security guards the night before near Austin, Texas, in what one witness claimed was a professional attack, and not just a random shooting incident. He took it in, saw the look of worry in Kathy's eyes. Anyone who taught in a public school, especially couples who taught in the same school, talked about, what if it happens in our school? He gingerly leaned over to kiss Shelley on the top of the head, making sure she didn't smear him with pudding. He wrinkled his nose. The kid stank, and he suppressed a gag. It was definitely one aspect of fatherhood he was an utter failure at, and he was glad that he was heading out the door rather than being called up for diaper service. "You little monster, love you," he sighed and gazed back at Kathy and smiled lovingly. Wendy was already at the car. "I'm late," was all he could say as an excuse, and was out the door into the chilly October morning. He looked back again and blew a kiss to Kathy, a tradition they had followed ever since the first night they had spent together. It was the last time they would see each other alive. Near Raqqa, Syria. Hashtag Dies 631. Sword 1, 4 hours. Sword 2, 4.5 hours. Allahu Akbar. Chapter 2, 7:45 a.m., near Portland, Maine. Bob?
All right. Chapter 1. Let me go through the chats real quick. All right. Have you considered plan if you're at work, school, or church? If your work, school, or church is a target of an attack? Calhoun said mostly keep an AR in your vehicle go bag if you're far from the house. On top of the vehicle guns you have. Routes, alternate routes, entrances, exits, IFAC, etc. Yes, medical. Justin B, hashtag Kipper Gang. Hell yeah. Dude, I ate all that Kipper dip like in 10 minutes. It was delicious. Hashtag Kipper Game needs to be one of the muffin top phrases. Yeah, that's true. That's funny. What do you guys think? Anything crazy off of that?
My only comment would be that we're all desensitized to what could be threat indicators. Like you hear it every single day: shooting, violence, violence, violence. It just all becomes background noise. But as you come to find out later, like what was on the news is all indicators, threat indicators, and just being completely oblivious to it just because you're desensitized.
I agree.
Other than that, there's not much to say. It's just kind of a setup chapter.
Yep.
Backstory.
Rolling.
Let's roll. Autobots.
Roll out.
Parked the car that he and Kathy called the Indulgence in his usual spot at Joshua Chamberlain Middle School. The red 350Z seemed a bit extreme for someone getting by on the pay of a high school teacher, but they had purchased it used years ago before Wendy was born. In fact, just a couple of weeks before finding out Kathy was pregnant. The car had remained, even though it was totally impractical for a new family. The more utilitarian Subaru SUV took the parking space alongside it in the driveway of the small 3-bedroom home they had purchased 8 years ago. It was not the existence they had talked about when they first met and had fallen in love. The plan had been, after they married and landed their jobs at the middle school in a suburb of Portland, that after several years he'd go back to grad school, then leave teaching for a far better paying job in the corporate world. She would then pursue an advanced degree in math and teach at the college level. With that accomplished, perhaps his writing would even take off someday. Making it as a writer was, as they called it, a Cinderella fantasy, but it had sounded nice at the time. Then Wendy came along, and as is so typical of life, the game played out with the two teaching and saying to each other that in 25 years, when they could collect retirement and Wendy was off to college, they would resume those dreams. And then the midlife surprise of Shelley put that plan on further hold. As he made the motions of opening the car door to get out, he caught a few seconds of eye contact with Wendy, and he had no complaints. He and Kathy had a loving marriage, a rarity, it seemed, in this world, and two girls who were blessed with good health. Sure, it was a grind, going in early and staying late at school, and finances were tight with Kathy staying home, but at this moment, on this peaceful autumn day in Maine, his daughter flashed him a shy smile, and he felt blessed and grateful for it. "I'm late, Daddy," Wendy complained as she opened the door and started to get out. Gone were the days of walking her into primary school, holding hands and sharing a hug. Perhaps she sensed his disappointment because she glanced back at him and gave him a toothy grin, a reminder that the big expense to come this year would be braces. "Love you, Dad," she offered, and then was off, running to the side of one of her friends. Wendy began showing a text message on her phone, which she'd have to shut down once inside the building, and both of them giggled. He sighed. Once she was out of sight, he opened the compartment between the seats. Something about the news today. No, not just today. The news every day of late had forced a decision that only Kathy knew about. He pulled out a Ruger 380 from the glove compartment and slipped it into his pants pocket. Even though he had a permit to carry a concealed weapon, he was now in felony violation of both federal law and the laws of the state of Maine. If discovered, he would lose his teaching license and face up to 5 years in prison. If found out by someone simply seeing the pistol, if it slipped out of his pocket as he squatted down to pick something up, if the pants he was wearing were a bit too tight and some sharp-eyed co-worker got suspicious and ran to tell the principal would summon him while calling the police, who would then come and pat him down, handcuff him, and take him to jail. If found out, he would be in prison, licensed to teach revoked for a lifetime, and pay fines. The national media would show a viral video of him being let out in handcuffs. The only crime more reprehensible in a school? To sexually stalk or use a student, which he felt did indeed deserve capital punishment rather than prison with rehabilitation therapy and a sentence that was likely shorter than the one he would face. Caught by a student wandering into his classroom after hours to find him having an affair with another teacher? Embarrassed dismissal. Embezzling? Perhaps a fine and quiet termination. Incompetence in the classroom, which he also felt was a crime worthy of punishment. As long as the incompetent teacher's students jumped through the hoops of testing, no big deal. When he did complain once about another faculty member who, as he said, could not figure out his IQ unless he looked at the bottom of his shoe, the response was, "Mr. Iverson retires in 6 more years, so just let it go for now." Besides, the union would kick up a fuss. Being a teacher, Bob was at least able to force the issue with his own daughter by insisting on a transfer to another teacher. But for the other 100 kids stuck in Iverson's class day after day, well, at least in 6 more years he would be gone. The gun. Why the gun? He did not buy the years of administrative instructions coming from experts in the main office, while day after day he looked into the eyes of his students and inwardly asked, "What do I do if the nightmare came to Chamberlain Middle School?" He did not buy the counterintuitive logic that if there were a gunman in the building, to lock the door, lie on the floor, and pray. Well, not actually pray, for after all, this was a public school, but he could at least insist upon a moment of silence as they waited to get shot. In whispered conversations with only a few other teachers and Kathy, The conclusion returned again and again to the same point. Up until 9/11, all were drilled that if on a hijacked plane, sit back, relax, take a Xanax, listen to those in charge, and all would be well. Unless you were Jewish and the hijacker a Muslim. If so, ditch your passport and say your name is Smith. And then there was United Flight number 93, the fourth hijacking on that black day of days. The cell phone calls informing the passengers on that doomed flight that it was time to fight back. They fought and died, and in doing so likely saved thousands on the ground. After that day, he believed that it wasn't just the billions spent on security that had resulted in not a single hijacking in American airspace since 9/11. It was the fundamental realization that if anyone tried to take a plane, 200 ordinary Americans on that plane would fight back. That, more than any other factor, deterred the enemy, who now sought other targets, in the same manner that so many had once learned that rather than whine about a bully in an elementary school yard, the final and most convincing answer was to fight back on the spot. A comparison of the hijackings in the 13 years prior to 9/11 versus after 9/11 to Bob was proof enough of how to respond. So he broke federal and state law this morning, the law that experts had said for years was the only answer. To be defenseless? To lock a door? To wait and pray? He could no longer believe that argument. In whispered conversations with others, he argued that he was a teacher and, above all other considerations, his first duty was to protect his students no matter what. If need be, he would face prison for doing that duty. Better that than to be passive as a sheep and watch as the lambs in his charge get slaughtered. He had not taken his decision lightly or in a cavalier manner, as some macho idiots would do. He had legally purchased the weapon and taken the required course to carry a concealed weapon, though of course it was illegal to do so on school property. Kathy had as well, for she was a teacher at the time they had made the decision. They then took the advanced courses offered by a local firearms store regarding safety and how and when to use the weapon he was about to carry into the school in violation of the law. In his mind, it was a moral choice. If ever the children in his charge were threatened, he believed that the first responsibility of a teacher, transcending all other responsibilities, was to protect. He popped the magazine, double-checking that no round was actually chambered in the weapon, slipped it back in, and pocketed the gun. It carried 6 hollow-point rounds and resided in a holster pocket that Kathy had sewn inside the right pocket of his jeans. That done, he exited the car, opened the back hatch for his book bag, and, in what was now an unconscious gesture, ran his hand down his right side to make sure the weapon was properly holstered and not visible. He walked into the school, ignoring the warning signs posted on all school doors that Joshua Chamberlain Middle School was a gun-free zone, and smiled a genuinely warm and friendly greeting to Charlie, the 60-year-old security and resource officer who smiled a greeting in return. The two paused as Charlie asked about Miss Kathy, and they joked about the diaper he had avoided changing. He then traveled the short distance to his classroom and office in the IT wing, kids rushing past him, laughing, and locker doors slamming. It was the start of another typical day at Joshua Chamberlain Middle School, just outside of Portland, Maine. 8:45 a.m., Portland, Maine. They had driven up from Atlantic City, New Jersey, the day before, and stayed at a fairly upscale hotel just off the Falmouth exit of Interstate 95, arriving just after 8 in the evening the day before. They had been admonished repeatedly in their training to make sure they had a good 8-hour sleep when the final hours came, but none had done so. Regardless of their faith, how could one sleep soundly when knowing it was the last night they would spend on this earth, and, come the following day, they would die as holy martyrs? Regardless of all they had seen in their years of holy war, regardless of just how many they had killed, from putting the round of a Kalashnikov into the forehead of a grandmother who had closed her eyes in the final seconds, whispering a Christian prayer as she waited for death, to a screaming woman who knew her fate after being raped, to an infant whose throat was so easy to cut when asleep in the cradle. This they knew for certain. Their own time had come. The last hours of life were drawing to an end, their fears stilled by the promises of their caliph of what awaited them in paradise. How painful would death be? They had seen men and women burned alive, and the first time they had witnessed that, even though it was an infidel, there was a moment of flinching and wondering how one's flesh would smell if fate determined that they would die trapped in flames. How intense would be the pain? The Caliph promised them that if trapped in fire as a holy martyr, the flames would feel as cooling as a mountain stream as they winged to paradise. Some had even driven the nails to crucify Christians, a most fitting death for those of that absurd faith. The infidels were too weak to do the same to them, but the thoughts did linger about the moment of their death. Would it hurt? Rather than pain, would it become bliss, unlike any they had known upon earth, and be a foreshadowing of the eternal bliss given to one who died in jihad? All pleasures denied to them on earth would at last be theirs. Pure women, ever virgin for their desire to never be taken before them, and thus soiled by another man. If the woman given to them was not pleasing and submissive in all ways, they could be cast into oblivion at any time, for such women in paradise existed solely for the pleasure of holy jihadists. Awaiting them would also be boys with soft, pliant bodies and the faces of angels to be used as desired. There awaited every fruit to feast upon and fountains of strong drink as promised by the prophet and his living envoy, the Caliph. Such thoughts now strengthened their hearts for the task ahead and stilled their fears, filling them with the joy of anticipation. The journey had begun 6 months ago, starting with a container ship out of a Middle Eastern port. No one involved in this plan had traveled by air. Thus, they avoided the random chance of a database check, face recognition software, or a capture. Instead, over 100 jihadists had departed their homeland on random dates, never in a group, using a roundabout journey to finally arrive at Veracruz, Mexico. With all of the attention focused on airlines, the obvious alternative was container ships where chances were less than 5% that the ship would even be checked. During the spring offensive of ISIS into Iraq, over $500 million in hard currency had been captured. Not just useless paper, but actual gold. Bin Laden had boasted that his day of glory had been purchased for little more than $500,000 in American currency. What could $500 million buy? Most certainly the cooperation of the drug cartels of Central America to help pass along, at a cost of $2 million each, the jihadists from the port of Veracruz to the mules and coyotes who would take them across the porous border of America. Half the fee on signing, half on delivery to their handlers in America. And unlike some financial deals engaged in by the cartels, even they were fearful of the wrath of ISIS if there were a betrayal or a failure. Only 2 conspirators had been waylaid while traveling through Mexico to the border. To show their good faith to the Middle Easterners, the cartel had cut the throats of those responsible, along with the federal police who had refused to accept the bribes to look the other way. All electronic chatter was to be silenced except for the final moments. All of the jihadists had their plans, their marching orders, their pickup points, their transfers, and their final missions. They knew whom they would link up with and where all was laid out and memorized before leaving the training center in eastern Syria. Nothing was in writing. Nothing was transmitted. All had absolute faith in their leader that they would bring their vengeance to America. Those who had doubted, those who had voiced concerns or who had tried to back away once initiated into the secret, were already dead and buried in unmarked graves in the desert. For nearly 13 years, there had been hundreds of boasts by other groups, other so-called jihadists, but no successful attack had been launched within the United States since 9/11. The few attacks planned and initiated had been intercepted because of their own foolish mistakes. But the boasting had served a purpose. It had lulled the enemy. It had lulled those who kept watch but were not allowed to tell the American media of their successes. Even more so, it had lulled the sheep of their society. The absence of a successful attack in more than a decade had lulled them to believe they actually were safe. Even if the enemy did see something suspicious, it had been drilled into them for years not to be rude, to be politically correct, not to point and shout a warning out of fear that they would be called phobic or racist. At the same time, the jihadists had learned from the mistakes of the once respected bin Laden and those who followed him. They learned from the victories of their enemies because those victories often resulted in a repeating of the same actions over and over. Yes, they did have strengths with all of their technology, their drones, and their cell phone call intercepts. Therefore, infiltrate the target as low-tech as possible. Approach with utmost stealth, like a shadow in the desert at night, and not brazenly walking under the noonday sun. In the preceding months, the way paved by money looted from the successful offensive into Iraq, there were careful transfers of each jihadist across the border. All fighters had been carefully screened and selected for the mission. Thousands of foreign fighters had joined the ranks of ISIS, some of whom were frustrated with the increasingly conservative ways of al-Qaeda. The leader's main criteria for selecting his jihadists for this mission: their willingness to die in jihad, a rigorous vetting back to their birth, and numerous references to ensure that not one of them was an agent or traitor infiltrating from the West. They had to demonstrate a near-perfect ability to blend into the Western world. It amazed him how the attackers of 9/11 were, upon reflection, far too obvious. That risk would not be run this time. Their command of English had to be near flawless. They had to be able to put on a business suit, walk through a crowd, and no one would take a second look. If need be, they could even mimic adherence to an infidel faith and speak warmly of their love for Jews. This was no violation of faith, of course. The renowned scholar al-Bukhari explained such logic when he commented on Surah chapter 3, verse 28 of the Quran that we smile in the face of some people, although our hearts curse them. And of course, there was Surah chapter 3, verse 54, which declared that the best deceiver of all was Allah himself. Such words were armor for the hearts and souls of his jihadists to infiltrate the evil heart of the West. Those who actually at some point in their lives had lived in the belly of the beast, the world of the infidels, attending Western schools, he personally checked as to their faith and willingness to die as holy warriors. They had to show him their ability to fight and kill without second thought or mercy. During some of the thousands of executions in Iraq, he had made sure that those being considered for this attack took part in them. They were required to wield the knife for beheadings and drive the nails for crucifixions. No double agent would do this. If they blanched, they were no longer considered. Those who failed the tests were dead before the sun set. They were required to shave their beards, their clothing tailored by experts, learn to speak in the latest dialect of decadent America, and drill relentlessly on their created identities. In public, they would gossip about the latest game or whorish starlet, even drink a beer with dinner in a barbecue restaurant. If offered forbidden food, they were to eat it without hesitation. He reinforced the rulings in the Quran that those on jihad were exempt from all sins. Only in the privacy of their heart would there be prayers, until the final hour before the assault began. Until then, blend in with your foe so adroitly that he will not question. If there is a question, he will fear to ask it because that is their culture. None of the targets was within 50 kilometers of a major city. That was another strength of their plan, to avoid the major cities where the random chance of passing someone on a street might trigger a recognition by someone trained well enough to recognize the wolf moving silently amongst the sheep. The Caliph reinforced that the slightest failure or lapse in the United States would result in damnation and execution, and, if shown to be egregious, their families would pay the price as well. Of course, there was always the random chance of something going wrong: a traffic accident, a drunk driver, perhaps an American veteran of Afghanistan or Iraq who just might take a second look. And such an event did happen. An angry American veteran claimed he recognized a jihadist. The jihadist left the fast food restaurant with his American handler, the vet following and shouting a challenge. The handler reacted brilliantly and, as trained, shouting back that the American was a racist, even as he thanked him for his service to our country. His cries of racism prompted those who were standing nearby and watching to back off and to even offer apologies, warning the veteran to leave the two innocent men alone. Gradually, the 30-plus teams came together around the country, going to ground several hundred miles or more away from what would be their final targets. The teams were made up of 3 to 7 jihadists, depending on their target and mission. The cover of some was to attend a trade show or convention. Others were on vacation, such as the team assigned to the state of Maine, which stayed for a week in Atlantic City, where they gambled and play-acted that they were rich Dubai bastards out for a little fun, while waiting for the countdown, waiting for the coded message that would not even be sent via the internet. The message that the attack was to be unleashed was actually a news story about one of their leaders being executed as a traitor. After weeks of staying well hidden in the midst of the enemy, the news story came. It was first broadcasted by Al Jazeera that one of the top commanders of ISIS had been denounced as a CIA spy and beheaded. It was picked up by the American media within the hour. Fox News had experts on within 3 hours, speculating that a breakdown was occurring within ISIS, and perhaps the enemy was turning on itself. ISIS even released footage of the execution to lend credence to the story. The man executed had been marked by their leader for termination anyhow. His faith was wavering. The execution was the signal to initiate the attack 2 mornings later, just before noon Eastern Time. No transmission, no internet, a news story as the only signal. The team assigned to Maine left Atlantic City that same day, skirting wide around New York City and staying within the speed limit, looking like 5 businessmen traveling to a conference and always speaking English. They purchased cell phones at convenience stores, but turned them off. They stowed golf bags in the back of the SUV for their vacation jaunt to Maine, while other teams headed to a beach house party in Daytona, a family reunion in Marietta, Georgia, a conference in Springfield, Illinois, a trip to see friends in Oklahoma City, and a trip to buy a boat outside of Seattle. The tools they needed had been carefully moved weeks earlier, one piece or several at a time. For the main team, an American handler who had been positioned far ahead of the jihadists who would carry out the attacks went to a famous mail-order house in Freeport for fishing supplies and then purchased additional equipment. American handlers, so-called sleeper agents, had infiltrated into America long before the plans for the attack were laid out and trained for. They were men with clean records who purchased guns across several months at gun shows or on the used market, never in bulk, just 1 or 2 at a time, and paid for with cash. Ironically, a number of weapons originated from the infamous Fast and Furious scheme, gleefully given to them by the cartels helping to transport jihadists across Mexico to the American border. The Kevlar bulletproof vests and other equipment were purchased 1 at a time from a number of different sources so as to not draw notice. Some were found on Craigslist. They moved the weapons to the more than 30 jump-off points for attack by tucking them under suitcases, inside golf bags, and among the overloaded vehicle of a family with several children in tow going on a vacation trip. The jihadists who would actually do the killing, until the day before the attack, were free of the encumbrance of a weapon in case of the random chance of being stopped. The handlers would be their drivers on the day of the attack, and if random chance resulted in their being caught prior to the attack, they would appear to be either gang members moving weapons for M13 or some other cartel gang, or just lone lunatics. But none were caught. Security had held so far. Each team worked in isolation. Only a few in ISIS knew the entire plan. If any one team was stopped prior to the day, the confession was the intent to shoot a plane down as it took off, thus focusing the typical American media panic on airports. They were forbidden under threat of eternal damnation to breathe a word of what they knew of the plan. But 2 broke that rule, one with a team north of New Orleans, the other in Las Vegas, who got drunk and slipped up in public during an argument with an equally drunk Marine who was on leave and made a comment about damned ragheads. Las Vegas, which, as the heart of America's decadence, was one of the most ideal of targets and was coveted by all while in training. However, it was decided the attack in that region would hit in the area of Reno, sticking to the plan not to strike within any major city. As the brawl erupted, the fool had spoken in Arabic that soon the infidel would truly learn to fear, for the day of wrath was at hand. His comrades uttered apologies as they dragged him back to his room. The next day, at a cheap hotel on the far side of town, he died from an injection to simulate a drug overdose. The same was done to the too loquacious one in New Orleans. Speedball overdoses were, of course, part of the American scene. Overdosed bodies, even Middle Eastern ones, rarely drew notice beyond a local news report. So far, there had been no wider reaction. Such things surfaced in the news for a single cycle, then as quickly disappeared. In the final 48 hours, the teams moved to their strike positions. After months of planning, tensions began to run high, as they always do before battle. One team member had actually gone off half-cocked in Syracuse. For reasons the rest of his unit did not know, he had driven away from the hotel where they had rendezvoused that morning with the handler who had transported their weapons and equipment. He had slipped out, taking the handler's car, and hit their target on his own. This had sent out a ripple of warning. Before he was killed, he had murdered 4 and wounded 10. They had been trained for the possibility that one of their team might be spotted and captured, but not for one of them going off on his own crazed spree just hours before the real attack was to take place. The group immediately split up, going underground to sweat out the final 24 hours and not breaking silence. Each would now have to act on his own as best he could, but their main target was abandoned. As to the activity of the team south of Austin, which the American media was reporting as the murder of 3 border security guards, it had been a random pullover by Border Patrol that had resulted in the 3 agents being shot within seconds and the team fleeing. Disciplined, they had slunk into the desert to sit out the final hours before resuming the mission. So 2 out of the 30-plus teams were in some state of disarray, but those in a hotel off the Falmouth exit near Portland, Maine, were ready. The cell phones had been activated, the Twitter account, long dormant, was activated, and the one lone tweet came in, time-stamped 7:45. Hashtag Dies Irae 631. 4 hours, Sword 1. 4 hours and a half hours, Sword 2. Allahu Akbar. There were 3 hours to go. The Falmouth main team contained units of both Sword 1 and Sword 2. Each now sat on his bed and prayed in silence, for today would be his last day on Earth, and tonight he would sup in paradise. 9:30 a.m., United States Central Command Office of Electronic Counter-Surveillance, MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Dies Irae 631 back online, 11:45 hours Zulu time. Message, 4 hours, Sword 1, 4.5 hours, Sword 2, Allahu Akbar. Tech Sergeant Quentin Younger, sipping his 3rd cup of coffee of the morning, sat up in his chair and gazed at the screen. The endless scrolling of data which, on occasion, would suddenly highlight a tweet and color-code it for level of concern and need to report. This one was coming up red-flagged, meaning it needed a human review and not just a computerized review. It was a message plucked out of the hundreds of millions of monitored tweets flooding the world every hour. Quentin scanned the identifying information attachment to the message. It was an account set up nearly a year ago, some innocuous text messages back and forth, the last one a complaint about a lost bet regarding the World Cup. World Cup tweets were drawing some notice when originating out of Syria as coded messages, but there had been silence on the account since the games had ended. Someone up the food chain had pegged Dies Irae 631 as a source of concern. He punched in a query to trace the followers. Several dozen were in Syria. There was talk several months back about the games, and one complaint about a failed encounter with a Belgian woman working in a medical aid station. Curious. There were new followers in the States as of this morning, all with hashtags of Dies Irae with higher numbers. No responses, though. He checked those points of reception. All were accounts that were activated within the last 2 weeks, purchased as cheap convenience store phones. Very curious. It was coming up on break time, and he yawned. Another curious item cropped up. Someone had code-named the surveillance file for this account as Dies Irae. What the heck? He punched in a Google search on the term. What was it, French, Spanish? Nothing significant. He scanned the line of possible alternatives. Dies Irae was the 3rd item, a Wikipedia article. Strange, something called a Gregorian chant. Latin. Day of Wrath, a hymn from the 13th century that became associated with the Great Plague of the 14th century. Great Plague. He had some memory of a high school history teacher talking about that. It was break time. The coffee had worked through him, and he needed to go. Creepy stuff. Why would someone in Syria be sending messages around in Latin? They hated anything to do with that language, still cursing the Crusaders of 1,000 years ago as their excuse to commit murder today. Regardless, the hashtag was coded as a high priority, and he hit the send button to circulate a message received, warning that it was being followed by receivers within the states and therefore would be bounced to NSA for further review. His job done, he got up for the restroom and silently cursed his hangover. 10:30 a.m., the White House. Dale Hinman took a second look at his screen, not sure if he was actually seeing it for real. Dies irae. He didn't know what it really meant, other than the fact that he was to kick the word up to the very top. He attached the email that was sent up from the NSA and forwarded it a very short physical distance to the center of this very building. Something was about to happen. The message was time-stamped 7:45 a.m. today. Whatever it was, Sword 1 would start at 11:45. He had done his job. Let those down the hall in the Oval Office complex figure out what was next. Chapter 3, 11:10 a.m., near Portland, Maine.
That was a big one. What do you guys think?
Too much detail.
There's no pleasing you, is there, Pat? No,
Intimate
No.
detail.
No,
it's setting it up, bro.
it's almost like an
Shows what their
instruction.
people do.
Shows like an instruction. It's like an instruction manual on how to go through. Just gives me the willies.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this book's almost a decade old.
Yeah, I've been listening to this book for a minute, bro.
Just shows more complacency and how they used our own society against us by calling people racist that might see what's up. Like, it just hits too close to home. Like, yep, this is exactly how it could go down.
Yeah. That's why I've been yes. This book has changed the way I do my get home kit and what I carry to increase what I normally would.
This
So,
book
yeah.
is a decade old.
Yeah. Now I carry an extra mag. Anyway, continue or no?
I can't think of any other takeaways, really. So let's roll.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this book doesn't
Kelly was
have a
down
happy.
for her morning nap, thank God. Wendy had been such an easy child, Kathy thought as she carefully closed the door to the nursery. Or was it that she was now 37 and no longer a new wide-eyed mom of 25 and still fascinated by every single thing her darling did? The news was on in the kitchen. More about the shooting in Syracuse. A video surveillance tape had just been released. The police alerted this morning by a hotel manager who, seeing the gunman's image from the school's security camera, had scrolled his own tape back and come up with a frightening match. The camera in the hotel was of the man leaving a back exit, and it was time-stamped only 20 minutes before the killings at the school. But what was far more disturbing now was the fact that less than 30 minutes after the incident hit the news in Syracuse, 5 men, obviously Middle Eastern, had walked out the back door of the same hotel, gotten into a single car, and disappeared. One of them had shared the room with the gunman. All schools in Syracuse were closed for the day, and the city resembled Boston after the bombing of the marathon race, going into a full lockdown with every local and county officer in a manhunt, along with a National Guard military police unit being called in, as well as federal officials. The hotel video provided at least a black and white image of the car that the other 5 had left in, but no license plate number. Syracuse was in a state of panic. An impromptu rally of angry parents was ramping up in front of one of the closed schools, denouncing the school system for inadequate security due to the failure to provide new security locks on classroom doors that would bolt the doors shut. A parent speaking for the group, demanding the new bulletproof steel security doors, was standing outside the glass window of the typical one-story middle school building that stretched for 100 yards. The fact that the lone shooter was stopped in the first minute of his attack by an off-duty police officer who had come to the school early to pick up his son who was ill did draw some notice and comment, and the officer was posthumously hailed as a hero. No one had noted nor emphasized the point that it was an armed parent already in the school parking lot who by lucky chance was there to stop the tragedy from becoming far worse. Kathy finally launched into loading up the dishwasher while the news shifted to the death of some reality show star. Disgusted, she clicked the volume down and logged onto her Facebook page to upload photos of Shelley's first birthday party from the weekend. Why was it the kid just loved to smear food, especially anything with chocolate, all over her face and hair, and then just sit there laughing as she and Bob groaned with disgust? Cute photos, though. Some new posts were there. Friends from college and her own teaching days were discussing the incident in Syracuse. When Bob had told her of his decision several years ago to ignore all the rules and carry a concealed weapon, they had agreed it was wise to avoid any comment whatsoever on the issue on any social media and in any conversation that stood the remotest chance of being overheard, especially by Wendy, who had the typical loud mouth of a 12-year-old. One never knew when the bounce back might hit. A post could be reposted in self-righteous angst about protecting our children, and then forwarded to Bob's principal with the demand that he be checked out. The usual argument was raging between her friends. Mary Browning, her college roommate down in Austin, was in a fury over the entire ongoing immigrant crisis and was now upset over the killing of the 3 Border Patrol officers just south of where she lived. Another friend replied that Syracuse was proof that more trained security officers were needed in every school in the country. A tweet from Mary popped up on Kathy's pad. Just heard lots of sirens on Interstate 35. Kathy looked up to the television on the kitchen counter. There was a helicopter hovering above a highway near downtown Austin and a line of police cars. A high-speed chase was in progress, and she saw the caption read, "Shooting in Austin suburb." She turned the sound back up. "We have live video now from our affiliate in Austin. Police are in a high-speed pursuit on Interstate 35, just north of the State Highway 290 interchange." There was no commentary for a moment. Someone in the New York studio gasped that it looked like gunfire coming from the vehicle being pursued. It sped past a tractor-trailer, which suddenly jackknifed across the highway, taking out the lead police car. "This is bad, it's bad," someone cried off camera. "It looks like puffs of smoke or something impacting that red car heading southbound." "Oh, no, no!" A southbound car, traveling in the direction opposite the vehicle being pursued, veered off the highway and rolled up onto its side as it slammed into the guardrail. The helicopter camera focused on that crash for a moment, then swung back to the jackknife truck, a police car tangled in the wreckage. Some of the pursuing vehicles were stopping, others were climbing up around the shoulder and accelerating to continue the chase. There was definite gunfire coming from that vehicle. It was the morning anchor speaking in a small box to one side of the screen. "You can see the puffs of smoke. There. They've hit another car, that white SUV. My God, it looks like automatic fire. They've shredded that car." Kathy looked at the clock. It was 11:30. Bob should be on lunch break by now. The news in Syracuse, and now this? It made her feel uneasy as she picked up her pad. "You seeing the news?" she texted to Bob. 11:32 a.m., Chamberlain Middle School, near Portland, Maine. As he walked into the faculty lounge, his cell phone beeped. It was a message from Kathy. Bob put his lunch bag down on a table in order to pull out his phone and check. He refused to keep his lunch in the faculty fridge. It was gross. The last time he looked, a bulging Tupperware container was ready to explode. Ed Winston, the 8th grade science teacher, said it was an experiment, and if not, a hazmat team should be called in, but no one was volunteering to clean it out. He paused to look up at the small television in the stuffy and rather ill-kept faculty lounge. No one spoke. The television was always tuned at this time of day to an inane talk show, not as bad as the one that always wound up in fistfights, but nearly as bad. He checked Kathy's text. It wasn't the usual "love you" message or a report of some antic or complaint about Shelley. "Hey, can we switch the channel?" he asked, looking up at the screen. Two of the male faculty, bent over their lunches, silently nodded agreement but kept their heads down, saying nothing. Margaret Redding, as usual, held court here, and few dared to cross her. To interfere with her favorite program was cause for a war which she always won. Years ago, other faculty who shared the same break time had given up arguing. There was always the inevitable accusation later of inappropriate language, demeaning looks and attitude, or an offense that hinted at heinous crimes that would have to be dragged before the principal for arbitration or bumped up to the personnel office for the district. It was more hassle than it was worth, and never a victory, only another humiliation or, at best, a suggestion that the faculty form yet another committee to decide what should be on the television at which time. Of course, Margaret made sure that she ran that committee and that her show stayed on. "You know I prefer this program," Margaret replied coolly, without even bothering to look at Bob. Without bothering to ask permission, he boldly walked toward the TV, looking for the remote control. He made eye contact with Margaret. The remote was resting on the lunch table directly in front of her, and if he reached for it, there would be another incident. "Margaret, I'm getting text messages from my wife that there's some breaking news. Let's switch the channel." No eye contact, only one word. "No, bitch." Of course, he didn't say that out loud. He stared at the two other faculty in the room for support. Both of the men kept their heads down, ignoring the entire exchange. He touched his phone to an internet search and started to type in the address to one of the local stations. "Bob, you know policy is that the faculty lounge is a computer-free zone during lunch hours," Margaret announced as she picked up the remote and made a show of turning up the volume on the television. The program showed several women sitting around a coffee table, voices raised in heated argument about whether a popular male star should divorce his cheating wife. She had been caught on a cell phone camera swimming nude and making out with another female star on a movie set in the Mediterranean. The video had been playing over and over on numerous websites for the last day. One of the commentators giggled slyly and suggested that of course her husband would welcome both of them back. He ignored Margaret and the asinine television belching out its mindless drivel and held his phone close to try and read a scrolling text across the bottom of the tiny screen. Something about the incident in Austin. It was impossible to see, and his frustration was growing. He looked back at Margaret, who was putting the remote down so she could take another bite from her sandwich. Bob leaned across the table and snatched it. He turned and, to add insult to her injury, selected the local Fox station, which he knew she detested. She exploded with fury, accusations, and then threats. 11:35 a.m., Portland, Maine. The five gathered in one hotel room. The weather was cool enough that their long jackets did not look too out of place, but once into their vehicles, the jackets would come off. All were wearing full tactical gear. Black webbing with chest pockets holding extra magazines of 9mm hollow points. Kevlar vests were underneath the webbing, protecting them from neck to crotch from anything less than a heavy-jacketed armor-piercing round. They would leave in two vehicles, one a standard-size American-made car rented the day before by their handler from an agency near the airport. Three would go to their target in that vehicle. The other three would remain in the Tahoe and drive the quarter-mile to a nearby fast food restaurant, park in the back, and wait out the final minutes. The prayer for those about to become martyrs was short. The five faced to the east-southeast. One of them had placed a small mark with a grease pen on the wall so that they were properly looking toward Mecca. That was all. No cries out loud and no chants. That had been done for them the night before they left Syria. The few weeks of indulging in the decadence of their enemies had been merely a diversion without any stain of sin. For those who were to become holy martyrs, all sin would be washed away in the blood of their death, as the prophet had promised them. There would be no pity now. The play acting of smiling at a child and commenting how cute he was when the toddler had grinned at one of them while they waited in line for a meal was over now. If any had inwardly blanched at the thought of what they would unleash in little more than 15 minutes, they had been liberated of that conscience by participating in the spring offensive into Iraq. Each of them had been required to participate in the executions after villages and Mosul were seized. All had been singled out for a few days of training and practice on targets in a Christian neighborhood. The targets ranged from silent grandmothers who prayed as they awaited their fate, to screaming mothers begging for mercy, to children younger than the smiling toddler in the restaurant awaiting a meal with a toy. Their actions in Mosul had been enough to desensitize them to any aspect of their mission. Their leader had lavished praise upon them and promised the paradise that awaited them. Their handler, who had infiltrated America more than a year ago, tapped on the door, signaling that the vehicles were ready and waiting. The five left the room, just a few feet from the side exit. An Hispanic maid saw them advancing down the corridor and started to smile a greeting, but something about their demeanor caused her to back against the wall and stare at them warily as they passed. She knew without doubt that she saw with them the shadow of death passing by, a shadow that her grandmother had often spoken of when she was a child. She made the sign of the cross as they went out the door, then hurried to find the manager, driven by an instinct that something was not right with these men who had kept their room chained and barred during the 2 days they had stayed as guests, refusing entry even to have their beds made. 3 heavy canisters were in the back of the black, late-model Tahoe. They popped the back hatch and shifted the canisters to the back seat of the smaller American car. The canisters contained 6 shoulder weapons, 3 primary weapons of .223 and 3 backup weapons of personal choice. 2 had requested 12-gauge pumps, easily altered to hold 6 rounds with a mix of anti-personnel and heavier pumpkin ball ammunition for breaking down a door lock. The third preferred a short .45 semi-auto carbine that could be easily slung over the shoulder. The heaviest part of the burden being transferred was the 1,000 rounds of ammunition for each of their primary weapons, already loaded into 30-round magazines. Packed under the seats of the Tahoe were several thousand more rounds for the ubiquitous AK-47s for the second team, who would stay in the Tahoe. They were the Sword 2 team, who would begin their attack a half hour after their brothers of Sword 1 attacked. No explosives were with their packages. The wise evaluation of their leader was that there was too much risk in acquiring and moving explosives. This decision had been argued. It was easy enough to buy black powder on the open market or, with a bit of training, learn how to convert a few bags of lawn fertilizer into explosives. The Caliph, however, replied that such a move would be a tip-off and vetoed it with the strictest orders to not attempt any such purchases once in the heartland of the infidels. But it was easy and even amusing to assemble a couple of dozen small boxes that looked like IEDs during their final hours of waiting, boxes to scatter in the wake of their assaults and slow to a crawl any response by the infidels sent against them. They moved the shipping canisters into the second vehicle, drew the weapons and laid them into the rear of the vehicle for quick access, and readied the satchels for hauling the dozens of magazines of ammunition and fake IEDs to be instantly grabbed the moment they reached their target. They started to climb into the 2 cars. "Excuse me, sirs, are you checking out?" They looked up. It was the hotel manager coming out the back exit behind them. He looked Indian or Pakistani, his accent a giveaway. Slender, dark-skinned, he was all smiles, but obviously nervous. They had seen him looking more than once in their direction as they ate dinner the evening before in the hotel's small restaurant and bar. They had indeed aroused some instinct in him. He wasn't Hindu. He was a Pakistani Christian who had fled the region near the Afghan border with his family back in the early 1990s. He had raised his children as Americans and was grateful every day for the peace of this land. The sight of these men triggered some instinct of fear. It was their eyes. As a young man, he remembered fighters coming across the border during the Soviet War in Afghanistan, recruits flooding into the war zone from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria to become jihadists and kill communists, but happy to kill Christians as well, even though the local Christian community ran a hospital for wounded refugees. These fighters had the same dead, shark-like eyes. The way one of them turned and faced him told him that even here, in America, in the state of Maine, which all assumed was far safer than places like New York or Chicago, was now as dangerous as the streets of his home village, as dangerous as Mosul, Tikrit, and Aleppo. It was the last thought of his life. Though nervous at approaching the men, they did not even give him time for that nervousness to turn to fear. Little more than 3 seconds after he asked the question, his brain was shattered by the impact of a single round to his forehead. His conscious thoughts did not even register the flash from the muzzle of the 9mm, fired from less than 3 feet away, nor did he hear the triumphal cry of Allahu Akbar. The two vehicles left the parking lot 30 seconds later. The maid, who had apprehensively stood in the doorway and watched as her friend and manager innocently walked into his death, collapsed to her knees, screaming and calling out to the Blessed Virgin, while another maid, a refugee from the madness of Ethiopia who was far more used to the sight of cold-blooded killings, began to fumble a call to 911. Chapter 4, 11:43 a.m., near Portland, Maine. Kathy looked up from her pad. She had been trying to connect to her friend Mary in Austin, Texas, texting her, while her attention remained glued to the television where the murders along Interstate 35 near Mary's neighborhood were continuing, and the ticker along the bottom of the television reported a second shooting incident in Syracuse. Apparently, an accomplice of yesterday's school shooter had been cornered in the parking lot of a shopping mall. Kathy heard a siren, a police car racing past on the state highway, 1 block over from her home. Seconds later, a second police car followed. It sent a chill down her spine. What was going on? A third police car, seconds later. Fear. Her heart constricted, beating faster. Surely this was not all interrelated in some way. She and Bob had shared whispered conversations often enough after Wendy was asleep as to the possibility that some horror could indeed happen here, and what was their drill, their response. They had talked about it scores of times, but were those fears and whispered conversations now triggering her into an overreaction? She texted Bob again, "Turn on the news, now!" He had not responded so far. 11:44 a.m., Joshua Chamberlain Middle School, Portland, Maine. He had made the mistake of setting the remote control back down on the table, a gesture of long habit when watching a program with Kathy, who on their second date had accused him of being a typical male because he hogged the television remote control. Margaret Redding snatched it back, switched the channel back to the program she had been watching, clutched the remote and glared at him defiantly, all but begging him to try and make a physical grab for it. She had already announced that she was filing a complaint of harassment, that to even try and touch her to get the remote would be a career ender for certain, and she was egging him on to do so. There was a flicker of a smile of the self-righteous professional victim who sensed that she just might have one hell of an excellent case if she could push him just one step further. At the very least, in a few more minutes, she would waddle out of the lounge, crying, head to the principal's office, and then take the rest of the day off due to the fear and anxiety he had created by his aggressive, dominant behavior. What the hell? It was Vince Rossignol, the quiet, introspective English literature teacher who, as always, studiously avoided involvement in any confrontation with Margaret. Bob thought Vince was standing up and stepping in at last to the confrontation with the tyrant, as all whispered when she was not present, of the faculty lounge. It'd be a 2-to-1 vote as to who controlled the television, and a witness that he had not physically touched Margaret. Vince standing up might be a crucial point to argue after school when, yet again, he was summoned to the office to answer Margaret's accusations. But Vince was not facing them at all. He was at the window, splitting open a couple of the dust-covered blinds and looking out to the front of the school. A blue sedan had pulled up directly by the walkway entrance, in a no-parking or standing zone. 3 men were piling out, dressed in black, reaching into the back seats and pulling out satchels to sling over their shoulders. One of them stood straight up. He was holding a rifle aloft in one hand. "What in the hell are those sons of bitches doing?" Vince cried, his voice rising and cracking. Margaret turned her wrath away from Bob to begin chiding Vince for his inappropriate use of language on school grounds, a definite violation as well, then went silent. "Are those guns?" "They aren't allowed to do that," she cried. Bob turned away from the television to look out the window. "Merciful God in heaven, it's happening," he gasped. The 3 men rushed toward the front entrance. The way the wing of the main building was angled toward the parking lot and main entrance, Bob could see the front entrance, which was less than 100 feet away. Charlie, their elderly security and resource officer, was actually exiting the front door, his only weapon a taser and pepper spray, both of them still latched and buttoned securely to his belt. In these first seconds, Bob simply could not react. Though the analogy was something from before his time, he remembered reading how some folks described such a moment of frightful shock as being like an old record that kept skipping and playing the same line over and over. This can't be real, this can't be real, this can't be real. It became very real when the leader of the group slowed, raised a pistol, and calmly put a 9mm hollow point bullet into Charlie's head from 20 feet away, the old man collapsing like a broken doll. Jesus Christ, this is it, Bob cried, but it took several seconds for him to reach into his pocket for his Ruger. Margaret started to scream, backing up against the wall, ironically still clutching the television remote control. Vince turned back from the window, gasping, and began to sag against the window frame, sobbing, already in a state of shock at the sight of the back of Charlie's head exploding from the impact of the round. Bob had played this scenario out in his mind hundreds of times. Nearly every day that he walked down the corridor to his office and classroom area, he'd ask himself, what do I do if... What do I do? But he had never played this one out in his mind. What do I do if I am in the faculty lounge, it's lunchtime, and not one but 3 gunmen storm the building, burdened down with multiple weapons, and blow the brains out of our kind elderly security guard on the front lawn of the school as their opening move? Thoughts started to race, and his mind, on the edge of panic, finally latched onto one. Where is Wendy? Is she already in the lunchroom, or is it math class? God, what time is it? Where is she? Where is my daughter? A bell started to ring, loud, insistent, piercing. Was it the lunch bell, or the alert for lockdown? Now a flurry of shots thundered down the hallway. Screams. Margaret turned and actually managed to lock the door to the faculty lounge. Get away from the door, Bob commanded, holding his pistol up and chambering around, but still not sure where to go. Margaret's gaze fixed on the small pistol in his right hand. More gunfire sounded from down the corridor, echoing like firecrackers. Screaming. More screaming. Children's screams. You can't have a gun, Peterson. I'll report you for this. Shut the hell up, bitch, and clear the door, he snapped, grabbing her by the shoulder and shoving her bulky frame to one side. He unlocked the door and opened it. Whatever instincts were still working for him, he knew he had to do something, at least for his daughter. He took a deep breath. At last, some flash of clarity settled in. His instincts as a father and a protector overrode everything else. He stepped into the corridor. The alarm for lockdown was sounding, reverberating, making it hard to think. On the far side of the main office complex was the wing for the gym, dining hall, library, science labs, his own IT office, and more classrooms. Behind him, doors to classrooms were opening up. In spite of the drills held at the start of the year before the students arrived, a fair number of teachers were reacting in the opening moments with curiosity rather than as they had been trained to do. Surely this could not be real, they were asking themselves and each other. A mistake? Bob heard someone shouting that question. Was this all a mistake or for real? Another shouted that some damn idiot of an administrator had gone over the edge and decided to pull an actual real drill with firecrackers included. If so, heads would roll after this one. Bob glanced back in the opposite direction of the gunfire. Where was Wendy's 4th period classroom? Was she in the lunchroom or still in math? The door to her math classroom was a few feet down the corridor and across from the faculty lunchroom. The door was closed, lights off. My God, had they gone for lunch and she was on the other side of the building with the murderers between him and his daughter? Suddenly, an explosion of shots rang out and glass shattered. He whipped his head around toward the office complex and saw the large glass window of the front office break apart, broken glass cascading down, screams coming from within. He caught a glimpse of the principal, Mr. Carl, gentle soul, who insisted on wearing a bow tie, which Bob thought made him look rather nerdy. Kids might say behind his back that he was somewhat dorky, but they all knew he had a loving heart. He was stepping out into the junction of the main corridor with the office complex. How many times had Bob argued about this moment, what to do if a gunman hit their school? Carl always replied that they would follow policy as they had been trained to do. According to his training, Carl was to be in his office calling the police and sounding the alarm. But he must have been down in the lunchroom. A group of children appeared at the end of the hallway, a class that had been heading to the lunchroom, and in those first seconds their teacher turned them back. Carl shouted for them to run for their classroom. A split second later, several bullets exited his back, and he sagged. The man was using his body to shield the terrified children even as he died. The group was running toward Bob. More shots resounded. God in heaven, it was Wendy's class. They were being led by their teacher, Patty Carlson, a first-year teacher still fired up with idealism about her profession. But there was no 3-credit course at the state university to train her for this moment. All of the other courses she had been required to take were now meaningless. There was much he had to process in the next few seconds. Carl was down. Several children he had tried to shield were collapsing. Was that Wendy? The bright pink designer scarf she was so proud of, a birthday present from her mother, was around her neck. The scarf made her stand out, and it filled him with terror that it would draw the attention of the killers as well. She was at the back of the line of panicked children running toward him. He saw a dark form at the end of the corridor, bulky, dressed in black. The man's shoulder weapon was raised. He aimed straight at the backs of the fleeing children. Flashes, an explosion of rounds. Children at the end of the fleeing group dropped, one after the other, shot in the back. There was an instant of silence, then the sound of a magazine dropping. I should charge him and shoot, the thought screamed at him. An instructor, when he took training, talked about muscle memory, of learning to react by instinct. The horror and confusion of it all was so overwhelming that he simply had not raised his pistol yet. All attention was focused on Wendy as he instinctively started toward her to pull her to safety, wherever that might be. He caught a glimpse of Wendy. She was down, but then coming back up, knocked over by the child directly behind her who had been shot. Her math teacher turned back to grab her, shepherding her children, physically placing herself at the end of the line to shield them, pushing them toward her classroom. The gunman slapped another magazine in, started to aim it down the corridor, and then, as if distracted, turned to his left and popped round after round at a range of but a few feet into a terrified group of children who were streaming out of the gym, trying to flee to their classrooms for lockdown as their teacher had trained them to do. Wendy was up, shoved forward by Patty. Bob grabbed her by the arm, placing his body between her and the killer before the gunman's attention returned to them. And together they bolted into the perceived safety of her classroom, slamming the door shut behind them and locking it. More shots rang out in the hallway, then screaming, then a distinctive cry, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and that focused Bob at last. This was not some random shooting, some cowardly son of a bitch lone shooter, or even a team of 2 or 3 psychotics. With their triumphal cries, he knew with absolute certainty that this was not the lone, crazed, sick shooter of the American scenario, the American nightmare ever since Columbine. It was Russia, 2004. This was the Chechnya scenario, the Beslan school massacre of 2004, the worst nightmare of all his nightmares as a teacher. The Beslan school massacre in the southern Russia province of Chechnya was a deliberately designed mass murder, the perfect storm of a terrorist mentality that viewed infidel children as tools to terrorize the enemy before sending all of them to hell. A handful of Islamic murderers who claimed they were fighters for an independent state seized the school in the Russian province on the first day of classes, which by Russian tradition was a time of celebration, proud parents taking their children to school and bringing small gifts of flowers and fruit to the teachers. But rather than a school opening with ceremonies and children singing traditional folk and patriotic songs, the day began with armed terrorists storming and seizing control of the building. First, they herded the male teachers and older male students to a back room and systematically cut their throats to eliminate any chance of resistance. It was an attack designed to terrorize a nation, and the next step transcended anything even the Nazis had done to cower a population. Girls as young as 10 were dragged to the roof of the building, over which news helicopters were hovering and reporting on the attack. Several terrorists held a child down as one of their fellow freedom fighters raped the child and then, while raping her, cut her throat. The Russian government, which still controlled its mass media, immediately shut the media links down with the concern that, whether it was right or wrong, the sight of this depravity might trigger a frenzied counter-response. The intent of the terrorists was to arouse a religious war between Orthodox and Muslim and to instill panic across the entire nation. Children caught up as pawns in that nightmare hell were then herded into a gym for what became a standoff of several days. The hostages were trapped in sweltering heat, with no food or water, so that many turned to drinking their own urine to slake their thirst. In the final conclusion of the horror, when security forces stormed the building, the terrorists, with a final cry of Allahu Akbar, detonated explosives ringing the roof of the gym, collapsing the structure. Over 300 innocent victims died. It was a nightmare scenario that had lingered with Bob across the years. He had warned of it, and with the shouts of triumph out in the hallway, he knew it had indeed come to his school outside of Portland, Maine. He scanned the classroom. Children were sobbing. One girl was screaming hysterically, cradling a shattered arm as a young boy, who seemed so calm, was wrapping a belt around her upper arm to make a tourniquet. A kid with some Boy Scout training, he thought. Another explosion of shots, rapid fire, echoed, and there was more screaming out in the hallway. He looked about, still clutching Wendy to his side. The Ruger was in his right hand, still unused. 6 shots of a lightweight pistol against what they were carrying. It might have worked against some damn crazed bastard like the one who had shot up the school in Connecticut. But now? There was more gunfire. The main lights in the hallway flickered off. A fire alarm began to shriek, and seconds later, sprinklers in the hallway came on. Emergency lights switched on and flashed, adding to the terror and confusion. Clear your thoughts, he kept repeating to himself. A glimpse out the window of the classroom door revealed a child lying in the hallway, twitching spasmodically. Another child started to get up, and then the back of her head just exploded. God in heaven, where are you? He cried. More shots went off in the corridor. It sounded like one of the killers was coming closer. He stepped away from the door, checking the room. The windows. The classroom faced west to the open playing yard and ball field. There were children out there in gym clothes, a teacher, one of the coaches herding them together. God, don't bring them back in. Run the other way. He went to a window. The upper part was standard safety glass, and a small hand crank controlled a lower window that could not open more than a foot wide. More gunfire reverberated in the hallway, then screams. The gunfire sounded as if it were receding, then was followed by a long, rapid burst. My God, they're beginning to move room to room. The decision was near instant. Out the windows, he shouted. Patty, standing in the corner, surrounded by nearly a score of trembling children, stared at him wide-eyed. We're supposed to lie down, Bob? Out! Get out! He screamed, trying to pick Wendy up with one arm and force her into the narrow escape of the crank-open window. She was kicking in panic, refusing. He pulled her back, set her down, pocketed the pistol, then picked up a student desk and slammed it against the plate glass window. It recoiled back in his hand, but the window cracked. The children flinched. Damn it, break! He hit it again, slamming the desk in, and the window finally shattered, safety glass breaking apart, a few fragments still clinging to the frame. Wendy ran to him and clung to his neck. Wendy, get out and run. Run and don't stop. Don't look back. Just run for the woods over there on the far side of the field. Daddy, go! He struggled to break her grasp around his neck, and then, to his horror, saw that the coach out in the field, with safety only 100 yards away, had actually rounded his students up into a group and was standing in the play yard, hesitating, looking toward the building as if some part of it would still give safety. A long burst of fire erupted, and the children outside began to drop. The group broke apart, running in panic. As they scattered, several ran to the parking lot but were cut down, collapsing into small, bloody heaps. One tried to get up and was hit yet again, the shot demonstrating the utter lack of mercy. Wendy saw it all, twisting, writhing to get out of his grip, screaming that she did not want to go outside. The months of training were now making it all so easy for the holy warriors of the Caliph. 2 were to first hit the main entrance, kill the staff in the central office area, and any ridiculous security man who might have a pistol locked away in his office. One of the 2 would then hold the entrance, while the second covered the back entry, shooting down any who tried to flee that way and keeping their prey pent up in the building. The emergency exits out of the gym and dining hall were then easily blocked by hanging several fake IEDs on the doors and announcing that as long as they stayed put, no one would be hurt. That if any tried to open the doors, they would all be blown apart. The third would then methodically begin to work his way down the 2 main classroom corridors, the wings of the building that contained 538 students and 37 staff and teachers. Once the classrooms were wiped out, attention would then be focused on those cowering in the gym and dining hall for the second stage of their plan. All of the information they needed in laying out the plan for this school had been garnered from the school district's website, from photographs of the interior posted by students, by a new math teacher proudly showing off her classroom, and by photographs and video clips of school plays, festivals, and sporting events. How these Americans love to film and post their children's sporting events, and provide so many details for a trained eye planning to kill them all. There were even blueprints and photographs of the newly built classrooms from 16 years ago, showing the design and layout of their new school. After seizing the main office complex, they knocked out the electricity and activated the fire alarms, setting off sprinklers to add to the confusion. With that done, the work now commenced of moving from classroom to classroom. A local police car pulled up to the curb in less than 4 minutes, summoned by the frightened call of the principal's secretary, who did as she was drilled to do, get that call out immediately. And then she died. The officer clambered out of his vehicle and saw old Charlie sprawled out on the walkway. There had been intense debate in the years since Columbine, renewed after Newtown, as to how the first officer on the scene of a school shooting should react. Wait for backup or charge straight in. The argument had shifted to rushing the building, since most of the killers at the sight of a police officer often shot themselves and ended the madness. The local police chief told his personnel that they'd have to make their best judgment call when they arrived on the scene. As for himself, if he knew children were about to die at the hands of some damn lunatic, he would go in and to hell with waiting for backup. Every second meant a life saved or lost. So the first officer there, hearing the gunshots and screaming, knew he had to go in. The call from the secretary had not been clear, just a scream that there was a shooter in the building. Then the sound of gunfire was followed by the signal cutting off, and the near-hysterical 911 dispatcher shouting the news onto the police circuit. So he moved forward, the jihadist waiting for him, chuckling at how amateurish the man was. The jihadist switched his weapon from full auto to single shot and put a well-aimed round into the man's head, dropping him next to the foolish old security guard. The sight of the 2 dead bodies would give the next approaching officer reason to pause. In order for the plan to work well, to achieve all that they wished to achieve, they needed the next hour free of interference. The leader of the 3 holy warriors clicked on the phone he was carrying. No more need for security regarding that, selected the website of the local news station, and smiled as he saw that their regular programming had been interrupted. They were already reporting an incident that appears to be unfolding at Joshua Chamberlain Middle School. It truly was going according to plan. Bob clutched Wendy, watching as the children outside scattered across the playground area, while out in the hallway he could clearly hear the gunfire erupting in a classroom across the corridor and one doorway down from the faculty lounge area. He heard loud screams, prayers, begging, relentless shooting, and repeated cries of Allahu Akbar. If they were following a pattern, this room would be next. He hugged Wendy fiercely and kissed her on the cheek. "Wendy, you've got to run. You've got to run as fast as you've ever run. Go to the woods across the field now. Run!" He tried to force her slender body through the shattered window. She began to kick and struggle, slicing her knee open on the edge of the shattered glass in the window frame. "Daddy, no, I want to stay with you." He forcefully pulled her loose from her death-like grip around his neck. "I love you. Tell Mommy and Shelley I love them. Now run!" He threw her out the window so that she landed sprawling, scrambling to her hands and knees, sobbing, a look on her face as if he had brutally rejected her. She actually started to try to climb back in. "Damn you, Wendy, listen to me. I am ordering you to run. Do it! He tried to force an angry gaze, as if furious with her, to frighten her even more than the horror of what was around her. She looked at him, shocked, and stepped back, then winced as the sound of gunfire echoed around her. Run! She turned away and finally began to stagger across the play yard. I love you, sweetie, he whispered, then turned back to face the others in the room. Patty, listen to me. We've got to get all these kids out. Bob, we shouldn't. We can't. Her face was stunned at what she had just witnessed. Damn it, Patty, do it. Bob, we're not supposed to. She was in shock, beyond the ability to reason, and crucial seconds were ticking by as brutal death approached. He glanced around the room, saw the boy who had struggled to put a tourniquet on his bleeding classmate. Your name, son? Johnny O'Sullivan. You a Boy Scout? More gunfire out in the hallway, then the sound in the distance of a siren. At last. Yes, sir. Son, I want you to run. Tell the police there are 3 gunmen. They are Muslim terrorists, most likely armed with automatic weapons, who plan to kill everyone inside. You got that? Before the boy could make a reply.
All right, guys, it's getting pretty late, and I know there's not a whole lot of people watching because other people got chats and stuff, but these chapters are a little bit bigger than our standard ones. This book pisses me off a lot, and I've been listening to it on repeat every month. So I hope you guys maybe reevaluate what you're carrying and what you may do. I think I've been really going out of my way on my medical to carry a lot more medical. I think, 2 or 3 tourniquets and a couple Slishmans, they don't weigh a whole lot. Thanks for tuning in. This is a really good book. Go ahead and continue it. Take some good stuff from it, but I think we're going to call it a night there, guys. I think everybody's, this is, like Pat said, it's a lot of detail. And quite frankly, these plans have been in effect for multiple decades, but now I think they have the manpower here, boots on the ground, to do it now after our last presidency. 2.5 million people. They're gang related. They're T cell related. These T cells have been training this. These kids grew up to do these roles. They've been training their entire lives in shithole countries. They're not like our people here that, quite frankly, are very sheltered from world-esque events. Stay ready, stay armed, stay vigilant, move more, whine less, work your body out more, be the best you can be. Calhoun said he upgraded his pocket gun from a 6-shot Ruger. Yeah, 100%.
To the max.
Even if you're like, this is a very widely carried piece. This is because it's comfortable, because it's easy, right? It's a pocket pistol. And just having it is not a safety fucking blanket, dude. That's why I will not carry anything less than a Glock 19 size gun. Maybe a 26, I could see. You need to have something that can have double mag fed weapons. Like my backup mag's a 17, even though I carry a 19. Why? It's a couple extra fucking rounds. Duh. You can't go the other way. You can't have a 17 and slap a 19 mag in it. That's why I do it. There's statistically more Glock 19 mags in this entire country than any other pistol mag out there. So that's why I carry it.
Well, not only is it a small pistol with a limited capacity, he didn't even have one in the chamber.
No. And because he's comfort carrying. It's a safety blanket. It's like a pacifier. He has it in case he needs to put it in his mouth, right?
Well, he's in a non-permissive environment. Anything bigger than that,
right?
He probably wouldn't be able to carry it at all.
I'd say if you're carrying it, you might as well figure out a fucking way to carry an extra mag with it at least.
Yeah, definitely. Like those magazines are so tiny. You could put 3 or 4 in one pocket easily.
Yeah, get an ankle fucking rig. I mean, if you really got to carry that, yeah, Lawfully Armed has one in his chamber. It's a huge fucking, and I've talked about it with Lawfully because we have a video coming up. I have a mag member picked up his first pistol, and this is it. It was from a family member who carried pocket, and he'll probably carry pocket, but Well, not if I have anything to say about it, but yeah, there's things you can do even if that is your rig. To
It
be
beats
more,
a sharp stick.
yeah, 100% it beats a sharp. It beats a Sharpie pen in your hand, you know. But like Waffley said, it's a 7-yard gun and under. That hopefully it's not the takeaway is decking out your Ruger LCP. I would rather you have that than nothing. 100%. Please, for the love of God, have one fucking mag with it at least. Okay? Every time I go to pick up my son at daycare, sometimes I'll be lazy and I'm like, oh man, I got my gun on me. That's enough. And then I think about this book. I did it fucking today, guys. And I reached back in the Jeep and I threw the mag in my pocket. So I had a backup. I'm like, I stood there at the fucking car after I shut my driver's side door. And I'm like, what if it happens today and it was the day that I was so lazy enough not to have an extra fucking mag? And I'm the only fucking guy in there between all these fucking crazy people and these kids. I want at least a reload. Please carry at least a reload. That's all I want to say about it.
Not very me. What do I call me? The 380 debate team now? I've already had it in the first. I will not carry anything lower than a
9mm. The smallest gun I'm going to carry ever is a 43X. That's what I want. That's my super duper high tech. But you know what? When I'm going to school events and things like that, my kid's just going to let me in. When I was a kid, I let people who had firearms in my school. People that loved me enough to carry a firearm in the school, and I let them in. All the kids know how to let people inside the building, okay? It's not a big deal. They're there for good. If you know it's a good person, I'm in the water. I'm sorry. If you have a good person and you're going to let them in, you could just simply say, oh man, I didn't know they had it. I have personally let family members in my school when I was in high school that I knew had a firearm on them to go around a metal detector. And I felt much safer having them there. So you do whatever you're going to do for that. I am past that point now. I hope my son will do the same for me. So.
And the chapter before this, and even the main character himself was talking about going over the scenarios in their head before. The wife said that they had talked about a plan of what to do if this had ever happened. Doesn't really go into detail what their plan was.
No.
And he said that he'd gone scenarios in his head of what he would do if it was the day, and none of them were this.
Yeah. So if you go through life saying, "Hey, it's just going to be some crazy guy. It's just going to be some crazy guy," I want you to stop and say, "What if it's two guys with AKs?" It's a big fucking game changer. Sure could be. Stay stacked, stay prepped, think about stuff. If it's EMP and you're stuck in Walmart, I carry a lighter for 2 reasons. One, it's winter. Fire is how you stay alive. 2, if an EMP happens, you still can fucking get out with a lighter light. And it's cheap. If it goes through the washer, whatever, I don't care. You guys need to evaluate your EDCs, and you need to, if you're really prepping for everything, you need to have it all on you. That's why I basically carry a duty belt every day. Dude, how many fucking fat people alone, but how many people do you know carry a folder and a fixed blade in their EDC? I carry it every fucking day, dude. How many people carry pepper spray? Nobody. I would rather have pepper spray if one of those dudes is coming through a door and unload the whole fucking can in his face to give me a shot at grabbing his piece than nothing. Or be able to hand that to my wife if I had a little 380. So we have two people in a mix, man. Like, you gotta have anything. I don't care. Yeah, and if you're in a non-permissive environment, maybe they'll allow you to carry like a multi-tool or one of those little key bars or something. Or they won't let you carry anything. Carry those little key folder deals that are heavy. Because I'd rather have that to smack in somebody's fucking face than nothing. But, I mean, that's not exactly a winning fight. But Don't be fucking lazy. Just slapping a gun in your fucking waist and saying that's enough. Carry a fucking spare mag at minimum. And it's
Yeah,
for malfunction.
there's a guy who makes Sharpies that have like a carbon something or other,
Mm-hmm.
like the felt part's been replaced by a stabby pokey part, and it goes
Right.
through metal detectors. You can get like punch daggers and stuff that are all composite
Any of that.
and can go through metal
Any of it would be
detectors.
better than nothing. Yeah. The LCP Max, I honestly think it's a good piece. If I wasn't such a Glock hoe and won a Glock 43, I would buy it. That would be the other option. Those two options are the only single stack in my library besides maybe a shield. But I think it's bigger, so no. If you want a small gun, those are the two guns I'd carry. I won't carry
43
anything.
is
Go ahead.
the 43 is technically like a stack and a half.
Right. That's why it's basically a 19, but just a little bit smaller.
But you got to get the 43X. You have to get the S15 magazines though to get the high capacity.
Yeah, I wouldn't even mind a 43. I carried a 43 on my wedding day in my boot. It's a good little gun. I trust my life to it. I have a couple extended mags for it, and I had one in my other boot. I still had two fucking mags on my wedding day.
It's it's just ridiculous with those S15 magazines though to have a 15 rounds plus one, like in a flush fit magazine on that thing. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I would recommend though, if you can and you got an LCP, because the trigger does fucking blow, a minimum a laser on it, especially if a gal's gonna carry it.
Laser won't make you shoot any better.
No, but it helps. It's a psychological thing, especially for women. But you know, especially
more of a-
blank range, it's
just money pissed away. For people that
It's
won't
more
go
of a it's more of a just point and shoot kind of thing because the sights on it are just basically non-existent.
right.
It's just like an itty bitty little notch and an itty bitty little bump on the front.
I'll take any advantage I can get at the end of the day.
I feel personally attacked because that was my pocket carry for a long, long time.
Well, you shouldn't feel personally. That's what I'm saying.
Still
it's a
is.
lot of people's. It is a lot of people's piece.
I do have two reloads on me though.
Good. Well, Lawfully carries one. You know, or is that your wife's or whatever? Somebody in Lawfully's family carries one. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know what's up with the Muffin minigame, guys. So I'm gonna have somebody look at it and see if we can recalibrate it a little bit. That's not the takeaway of this fucking chat. The minigame's not it. The fucking thing for this chat is to be ready, and you need to have kit in your car, and everybody's medical needs to be increased. And if this terrorist stuff does go down, oh shit, I'm on fucking YouTube. I've been nuked. Look at that. If this shit goes down, guys, you're gonna need a shitload of medical, and we're gonna need a shitload of Jesus, because this is going to, well, we haven't got there yet, but it's going to happen in every state. It's not going to happen in capitals and stuff. It's going to happen in smaller fucking towns where there's no fucking help coming. You might be the only motherfucker between 4 pieces of shit and the 12 only fucking sheriff's deputies, or the 8 or however many fucking sheriffs you have in your small town. It might be you and them on the fucking outside. And these people are fucking slitting kids' throats. That's disgusting. Don't be a lazy piece of shit. Work your fucking body as hard as you can. What if it comes down to you being able to fucking fight hand to hand? You better start fucking doing push-ups. My fat ass does fucking push-ups and squats and fucking dumbbells and shit, and I'm fucking lining up for a back surgery. Don't fucking tell me you can't do it. Everybody can. Just fucking saying.
I think it's intentional though. The way the book's being read, like, makes me even angrier.
It really does.
When he's talking about the terrorist, he's like, the narrator is just like so nonchalant, like almost I don't know how to explain it. Almost happy. and it just makes it worse.
Well, if you look, I mean, this stuff's been whitewashed, man. We've been like terrorist used to be or terrorism used to be a scary word. Now it's just like every fucking other sentence somebody can say it. This is dulled, emotions to be receptive to it and things on purpose.
Well, the word has also been overused.
Right. It's just like if you say penis, okay, well, it loses its fucking valor after a while, It's whatever. Dude, this book pisses me off. I'm sorry, guys. This really gets me fucking going. Dude, this makes me want to carry a fucking AR with fucking a fully fucking loaded satchel with the chest rig and everything and blah, blah, blah. I'm working on the buddy kit, which would be, I mean, if you really wanted to keep it in your car, you could, but most people commute from work. So if you have this and wherever you're going to fucking go to work, like within walking distance of that would be a good idea. Having a fully fucking like this one's just going to be like, I'm making this tote like as cheap as I can. So basically somebody, if they wanted to go out and had $900 this weekend, could put this bitch together like pretty much identical.
I know I come across as sheepish when I try to counterbalance you on this topic, but I highly caution everyone, if they decide to carry that level of kit, that they conduct themselves in a manner to not be confused as an aggressor. Because if you had all of this shit with you, let alone retrieved it and had it on you when something happened, your likelihood of being murked is high.
I agree with that. But by the time cops are coming in to get me, I will be probably baby butt naked waiting for him on the ground.
I understand, but it's easy for everybody to get wrapped up in the
Right.
Schwarzenegger hero fantasy.
I don't want to be that.
And
I
know.
feel like
if I have 20 kids behind me, I will fucking meat shield it, dude.
The mindset, if you found yourself in such a scenario, the mindset means 100% more than all the shit you've got on you. Like,
right.
While an LCP with no round in the chamber, so you've got 6 in the flush fit mag, is like far from ideal against guys with long guns, multiple guys with long guns. The mindset to survive and escape means infinitely more than you having full kit and like Call of Duty lobbying it.
Right.
Infinitely more.
I'd rather
like he should have broke.
I'd rather have
Bob
that
should have broke the window.
Yeah, he should have. I agree.
Bob should have broke the window like first thing, like, oh shit. When he saw guys rolling in, should have scurried that whole classroom full of kids out and then moved to the next classroom. Like he should have like dumped every kid out of that second floor before they made it up the stairs.
Yeah, and like you said in the comments, maybe having like a bracelet glass breaker that doesn't really scream tactical. That's a great idea. Or having a multi-tool that maybe doesn't have a knife. If you can swing like a multi-tool or a pair of pliers or something with all those bits and stuff, you could fucking slip in a piece of or even just a whole spark plug or part of a spark plug, and you could break it as needed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and I agree, Calvin. Like you do have to have stuff on you. Like I do. I carry all that I find reasonable every day.
Right.
But I'm just saying.
I feel very, very, very comfortable with this dagger and everything I've done to it with a dot and a 17 round mag to be extremely capable. Now you have to realize if it's your EDC pistol wise, you're not going to be laying suppressive fire. You need to have that first sneaky shot, and it needs to fucking count. Like you need to fucking drop that first dude, like face shot. Right? You don't want to be in a fucking fight with 2 mags on you versus 2, 3, 4 guys with fucking full kit. You are never going to win that.
I kind of feel like going all out on the first encounter would be the way to go in that situation. Just empty that gun into that dude as you're advancing on him, with the sole intent of taking his weapon.
Sure. These guys are military trained, moving, and you have to figure, I don't care what fucking raghead group they are, they've been training for this for years. And you're going to be going at them like that in emotion. They're already planned for it. They've already seen people. They've been battle hardened. They've probably capped more people than we'll ever have to. Hopefully, thank God. You know what I mean? Like, they've seen it. You will never win that way. Would it be nice? Yeah, battlefield pickup, cool. Maybe I can keep them out the door from even coming in with one round. You know what I mean? I don't know. There's, it's hard to say. Thinking about it logically and having it go down, but I know I don't want to be mag dumping and fucking relying on the one I got left in the pipe to fight 3 guys when I got kids behind me.
It's completely situational dependent.
Right. That's why having other things like I preach the fucking pepper spray. You never hear these dudes roll in with chest rig, and if they're gonna pop gas, they got masks on. If they're not gonna pop gas, you have an opportunity with pepper spray to affect it, and you can swing things your way a little bit. I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world, but fuck, if that's all you can have on you going through a metal detector, boy, I would fucking love that can of pepper spray in my hand.
Well, you're still going to blind them with the pepper spray
It's
they
not
won't be able to see.
instantaneous, but you also have something in your hand to punch with too.
Well, the pepper spray will cover the lens of their mask. They won't be able to see.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So that they're going to take it off or start flailing, I guess.
I've seen pepper spray do a lot of good shit. We've used it in Yellowstone to back a bear up. So, was it ideal? No. Did I have it? Fuck yeah, I did. Dude is a bear. It was enough to back that bear up a little bit. And oh yeah, what are you gonna do with a 9mm versus a fucking bear, right? Well, better than nothing, but that's when I was running my 10mm. Anyway, that's besides the point.
Shot placement is key.
10mm to the face, bro.
There's a lady up in Alaska. She took out a bear with a 380. It was busting through the window trying to get in. She
That's
just
like
calmly
the
walked
opposite
up.
of SOP for schools, by the way. They want them to quietly wait in their classroom. Yeah, but the problem with it is, like these type of people, that's what they want. Like they're literally just going to be picking chickens out of the fucking coop whenever they want to go cut their heads off. They're literally a grocery list just sitting there. You gotta figure out your medium ground, and you gotta war game this in your head. Be like, wow, if I work, I'm a basketball coach, or hey, I'm a baseball coach. If you're anybody, like if you're a fucking pastor, okay, our pastor carries a fucking gun. He's on the security
Badass.
team. Yeah, he's a badass pastor. He's cool as fuck. Okay, our pastor's not a pussy. Well, you don't need to worry about what the fuck he carries, but he's got enough people with him. Okay, that it really doesn't matter.
You've heard the true believer quote.
Go on.
Somewhere a true believer is training to kill you. He is training with minimum food or water in austere conditions day and night. The only thing clean on him is his weapon. He doesn't worry about what workout to do. His rucksack weighs what it weighs, and he runs until the enemy stops chasing him. The true believer doesn't care how hard it is. He knows he either wins or he dies. He doesn't go home at 1700. He is home. He knows only the cause. Now, who wants to quit? That was a quote from a special forces instructor.
It's how these people are bred and raised their entire life too. So, 100%, 10 out of 10 lawfully for the night. But yeah, Fiend Dog says he's always got a can of Ruger pepper spray on him. Good. I'm glad Muffin Top. If I do one dent, I don't care how many people think pepper spray's for pussies and women. You're wrong. I used it a lot at work. Okay.
Check the expiration
having
date.
that. Well, yeah, that's true. Definitely cycle that out. And you know what? Me and R have done it. When gals pepper spray runs out and it does expire, we've had gals that had pepper spray expire like 9 fucking years old. We let them spray us. It's training for us. It's training for them. So they actually see how it works. And then when they see that it's expired and we can actually fight through it and still like tackle them or something, they know, fuck, it's not enough. Most of the time, the gals that haven't done that before end up carrying a gun after that. So, just saying. You do you. I don't care what you guys think's necessary, what's not necessary. I'm letting you know, a flashlight and a pepper spray have gotten me out of using my gun almost 100% of the time in armed security. That's why I carry fucking both of them every goddamn. If I forget one thing, it'll be my pocket knife because I accidentally left it in a pair of jeans or something, or I have one in the door of the vehicle or whatever, and I just don't have one in my pocket. You know what I have every fucking day is pepper spray and my flashlight. Those and my phone. I have those every fucking day, no matter what. That's the if even if I'm going to the trash can at minimum, I have one or the other, if not both. Because that's when I've been bit by a dog. Okay? So the pepper spray comes with me when I'm taking out the fucking trash. And they work on raccoons and they work on possums and it works on I mean, if a skunk's coming at me, I'm gonna do a nice wide berth spray and then I'm getting the fuck out of there. But it'll back a skunk up, you know. I use pepper spray. I know it works. I carry it. You do you. You know what else fucking works? A Glock fucking 19 every goddamn time. Just saying. Anyway, rant over. I kind of wanted to end this a little bit earlier so I could get to bed earlier this week, but this book really fucking gets me going, guys, and it really makes me think. And you know another thing, if you can't carry the sword, the modern day firearm, fucking armor is cheap. You can carry soft armor, damn it. And you can carry a wooden fucking tire checker from a truck stop. You can get through a metal detector with that. It's fucking made out of wood. A club and a shield have been fucking weapons for millennia. They still work. Is it ideal? No. But Calvin Republic, I spray shit on everything. t.m.t. That's a sick quote. I should do that. Yeah.
What's the pepper spray recommendation?
I carry palm. It works great.
Like, what size is it?
It's just their small, whatever the fuck's in their pocket. I used to run a lot of Saber, but palm works pretty fucking good. It's the one I give away on the chat all the time. If it's a gal, Saber has a series that also has that translucent gel that they can't wash off. I like that for gals for rape reasons. But I carry palm. It works great.
And not like the little itty, like not the itty bitty little keychain size, but like a bigger size, or
whatever the fuck. How many ounces? I have a Saber one on me right now. I just gave my palm to a fucking grandma at church last week. Okay, my last one. I gave out fucking like 20 of them on chat this year, and I don't have another one for me at the moment. This one is how many fucking ounces? I don't know. It just fits from. I have medium-sized hands. It fits from palm to palm, for like 4 inches.
Kind of Kubaton size.
Yeah, like it fits in your hand.
Like a roll of nickels.
Yeah, like smaller than my mag.
Smaller than his penis.
I would like to say that, but it's probably bigger. It's about the same size as the Glock 19 mag, just a scooch smaller. Those palm, they work great. You can buy a 6 or 12 pack of them like I do on Amazon for like $65. Those are great stocking stuffers, by the way. They come individually wrapped.
Coldfoot's talking about shillelaghs.
I don't know. Saber, the UV dye makes the Reaper glow in the dark. Yes, the Reaper. Yes, it does. I spray that shit on everything. A shillelagh, a literal stick with hardwood. Yeah, yeah.
that should be your saying. Pepper spray. I put that shit on everything.
It fucking works, man. It really does. I put it on pumpkins to keep squirrels from eating them in the fucking fall and everything. Like, it works. It fucking works. But, yeah. Go be better than you can be, but better than carrying gear. Especially if you have a fucking spot where you can't carry gear, you can't smuggle it in, nobody can let you in. Fucking train your body. If you're fucking curling 20s and 25s, I'm back down to 20s because I lost a bunch of fucking upper body strength. Motherfucker, I could crank 45s. If you're stronger than that motherfucker, probably going to help out. Also, low key fucking, you could probably get them anywhere. Zip ties. If they have those doors on top at commercial buildings that have that arm, you zip tie that arm, it'll make it harder for them to open the door. Like putting a belt up there. Mindset, skill, tactics, gear, in that order. Thank you, Lovely. All right, I have to take a shit, guys. Let's call it. Yeah, this book we are at 1 hour and 28 minutes. If you want to read it again, there's 2 of them. There's 2-part. It's like 6-7 hours long for the whole book. It'll piss you off. If there's people in your life that don't carry whatever, or people that work at a daycare, school, whatever that you have, send them this book. It's free on fucking YouTube, man. It's fucking free. It's gonna take them 6 hours of their life. Okay, they're probably gonna waste that rolling on fucking TikTok 2 days. Hopefully they listen to it.
Is there a part 2 to this?
Yeah, I think this is part 1. I can't remember out of hand. I had to shit. This is it. We're done.
No.
Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight.
Yeah, what he's
5